Good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday evening. Week 11 in the NFL season is in the books. Time to talk about it.
Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Steves! On the My Channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue think they slate, dropping unrealistic mad 2K takes for the kick. Even though cats like that get views closer to the millie, never hear me preach, flip on to Philly. Before you watch the Eagles all the way through to early 22, authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way. Sports content for the realest that feels like day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. NFL Week 11 is in the books. It's time to talk about it. We already discussed the Eagles' victory over the Commanders on Thursday night, on Friday afternoon. So for the Eagles fans, and check that one out. If you haven't done so already, it's under my channel under live streams. With that being said, welcome to the NFL Week 11 recap. Your boy Nicky Steves, both on my channel and the Hardcore Sports Network as always. Make sure you hit up both channels. We always doing content for my channel and their channel as well. We got a good relationship with them. We do NFL Pick'ems. I'm going to be, for the foreseeable future, the host of the NFL Pick'ems, 8 p.m. every Wednesday. So we'll do the Week 12 picks. I'll be the host tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And tonight, we're doing the NFL Week 11 recap, folks. Let's get to it. We're going to start off talking about the Sunday afternoon game since we already talked about the Eagles in that recap. Let's talk about the Steelers and the Ravens. Steelers beating the Baltimore Ravens by a score of 18-16. It's not the most exciting offensive game in the world, but as usual, these Steelers-Ravens games end up being tight, competitive games that come down to the wire. And we can all, at this point, from strictly a competitiveness standpoint, the Steelers and Ravens is the best rivalry in the NFL. And once again, it delivered another competitive game. Now, it wasn't the most exciting game in the world, but it was another competitive Steelers-Ravens matchup. And the Steelers, once again, have the Ravens number. And it's one of those things, even in seasons where the Ravens outplay the Steelers as a team, when the two teams are matched up head-to-head, Steelers usually have their number at least once. I mean, the last time I believe the Ravens swept them was 2019 when the Steelers were down their starting quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, for that whole season. They did manage to get a sweep on them then, but as of lately, the Steelers always find a way to at least beat the Ravens once. But it's interesting, this time around, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a different position. They're actually looking like a legit team that could go places, which I asked me the question, are the Steelers contenders now? Because you look at it, they're in first place in the AFC North. They actually got a hot record of 8-2. Here we go. So you got to look at that right. And the way they're playing right now, Russell Wilson actually looks like a solid quarterback. And the defense is playing really well, which is expected. But now you're taking these Steelers defenses of the past couple years, which kept them in the mix. Now you got a potent offense. They're 8-2, and they found a way to beat the Ravens again. But so the Steelers, maybe this is their 1 year to try to contend. But on the flip side, I got to ask a question about the Ravens now too, because while they are in playoff contention, they are 7-4. They have dropped 4 games. So now you got to wonder, are the Ravens pretenders now? Or was last year kind of a good regular season, kind of fluky? Because this year, yes, they're in playoff contention as of now. They could still easily make a wild card berth, maybe win the division if they win out and the Steelers lose a few games, including the Ravens winning out in the rematch against the Steelers. However, most likely they're going to be a wild card team, and they don't have the same spark that made them contenders going into the playoffs last year. So you got to wonder, are the Ravens pretenders this year, or are they going to get hot at the right time later in the season? I mean, you guys can add, comment, let me know what you think on that. But I'll be curious to see. I feel like it's ironic I said that I was talking about the Eagles' upcoming schedule, saying the Ravens game would be a test for the Eagles. I think looking at it now, that game's more likely to be a test for the Ravens to see, are they just a good regular season team, or can they get hot at the right time and contend? That remains to be determined. But as of now, Steelers are the team. They're in the driver's seat in the AFC North. They're in the mix with the Buffalo Bills and the reigning defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs amongst the top teams in the AFC as of right now. So even though the Steelers, sometimes they're kind of boring to watch, they find ways to win games, and you gotta respect it, man. Gotta respect it. But speaking of team division rivalries, now we switch gears to the NFC North. The Green Bay Packers win and squeak one out over the Bears 20-19, but do so in ugly fashion. I mean, the Packers now, to be fair, they are 7-3, and they're in a loaded division in the NFC North, but the way they performed looked underwhelming to me. I was not impressed with the Packers' performance. You did have Jordan Love had a pick, and Watson was the offensive hero. He caught, he had a big reception, and they held, and that was going to help them out. But also, they were overall they were outplayed in certain categories. The Bears had more first downs than them, and if the Packers didn't get lucky to block that field goal, the Bears would have won. So I got to look at this and wonder what the Packers. I mean, Jordan Love, the way he's been playing, he's taking way too many chances and throwing way too many picks. While their Packers are still winning games, he's throwing a lot of picks, kind of like, former Green Bay Packers quarterback and welfare queen Brett Favre, just throwing the ball up, hoping someone will grab it. Except sometimes it's the player from the other team that grabs it. It's just that same Jordan Love starting to show some Brett Favre syndrome in terms of his style of play. You get the good, you get the flashes of brilliance, but you also get the boneheaded throws that lead to too many interceptions. And Jordan Love is showing that this year. So, I mean, but hey, the Packers did find a way to win, but at the same time, to barely beat a Chicago's Bears team that is down on the downswing. Here's a team that just got blown out by the Patriots and only got 3 points against them. And the Bears somehow find a way to at least look somewhat competent offensively in this matchup. That's a bit of a strike against the Packers there, but it is a win. You're still 7-3. That puts you in good odds of making the playoffs. But I can say this, to be fair, even though Jordan Love's not exactly the perfect quarterback, he's a young quarterback who, at least with Jordan Love, unlike the previous quarterback who was great, has fell off the map, and now everybody else is getting the blame for those problems. That's going to go. So let's talk about now the New York Jets. This is going to be a hot subject today. So the New York Jets fire general manager Joe Douglas after the team lost to the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday in their Week 11 matchup to drop to 3-8 on the season. Sure, I mean, granted, Joe Douglas's tenure as general manager didn't produce a winning team at all. So he's not innocent in this whole ordeal. However, this whole season, it's been all about blaming everybody else but the quarterback. The head coach, Robert Saleh, fired. Okay, not the best head coach in the world, understandable, but he got the blame. They traded to get Devontae Adams, threw Mike Williams out, the wide receiver, out the door to the Steelers. Now you're throwing the GM out the door. But that doesn't focus on what's the biggest problem. The biggest problem for the Jets is lack of a quarterback. That's been the biggest problem they've had throughout most of their franchise's history. And when was the last time the Jets ever had a real deal franchise quarterback? Seriously, ask yourself. Would you really consider Chad Pennington a real deal franchise quarterback? I mean, sure, Pennington flashed some brilliance. He had some good seasons, but he wasn't a real deal franchise quarterback. I mean, Joe Namath had that one great season, but outside of that, do some research on Namath's career outside that season. Who the Jets really had as a great quarterback? So this ties into the real biggest problem, the quarterback position. They got Aaron Rodgers, but they got him at the wrong time. They waited till it was too late to get him. And Rodgers is cooked. He might show you some flashes of brilliance, but he's not the same quarterback he was in his prime. And that's the biggest problem for this team. And it goes to show you that, and it's the biggest problem has been quarterbacking the whole time. Zach Wilson, he had his flashes of brilliance, but he also had his foolishness. He had his shortcomings, but, and it's a shame. I do feel bad for some of the Jets players. They're stuck in this situation like Breece Hall, Sauce Gardner, guys that are actually going out there busting their ass to make this team better, only for them to get the short end of the stick despite their best efforts. But this Joe Douglas firing, this is just another cop-out. If the Jets were going to do this and they were going to clean house, they should have done it during the offseason. If they weren't sold on Robert Saleh, they should have fired him in the offseason and actually done a proper head coaching search and tried to bring someone else in. You saw that Joe Douglas from 2019 to 2023, going into the offseason, wasn't the best GM, wasn't producing the best results. You could have canned him then. But now that the ship's falling apart with Rodgers, and now they don't have the injury excuse to piggyback off of, now everyone else is getting the scapegoat during the season. That also goes to show the incompetence all the way at the top of this organization. It really leaks all the way to the top. And the Jets, after years of incompetence, years of finding enough talent to make the playoffs in spite of themselves, back throughout the 80s, throughout the 2000s, now the 2010s and the 2020s, it's all coming back to bite them. And this Joe Douglas firing is just the latest in the ongoing saga of Jet blunders, aka Jet butt fumbles. Yeah, Douglas was a poor GM, but you're cleaning house midway through the season as a scapegoat for the fact that Aaron Rodgers, being healthy, isn't producing the results you want. And now you're going to go into the offseason with the inevitability that Rodgers isn't getting any younger. He's not going to be the guy you thought he was. What are you going to do about that then? I mean, this is years of bad decision making, bad draft investment, bad coach hirings, all these bad decisions coming back to bite them after all these years. And Joe Douglas was just a scapegoat for it. And the Jets are a soap opera at this point. They're kind of turning into what the Cleveland Browns were throughout the 2000s and most of the 2010s. But for the AFC East, fortunately, one of the teams that's been snake bitten that hasn't been able to get over the hump and win a Super Bowl actually has hope. And that is their division rival, the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills ended the Kansas City Chiefs' undefeated streak. For all the Chief haters that were tired of seeing them win, you got your wish. And let's face it, I think we all saw this coming headed into the game. With all due respect to the Kansas City Chiefs, they are the two-time defending Super Bowl champions. They have all the bragging rights. Patrick Mahomes got that cliche. He's got that bread. But we saw throughout the season, even in their win They weren't the prettiest wins. They were sometimes getting bailed out by their defense. They weren't playing the best ball. Now they were going against the Buffalo Bills team, a Josh Allen guy who's making a case for MVP, a team that we thought going into the season might not be the best team in the world. We thought they had lost some key guys such as Stephon Diggs. They weren't going to be as good, but Josh Allen's led the way, and that makes him an MVP candidate. And Josh Allen took his troops into battle against the two-time defending Super Bowl champions, and they got a win. And now, hey, career-wise, Allen versus Mahomes, 4-4 all time. Obviously, all those wins are in regular season games for Buffalo, but hey, they at least won this game. They beat Kansas City. Yeah, the Bills defense got 2 picks on Mahomes, and now Mahomes is 15 TDs to 11 INTs. And hey, Buffalo did their thing. They scored enough points to beat them. And that's right there. That laid out the blueprint for how to beat Kansas City. Score points. Kansas City's defense was one of their strong suits that was helping them throughout that winning streak. They weren't the most efficient team in terms of scoring points. This isn't the Patrick Mahomes team we're used to seeing, like from 2022 when they beat my Eagles in the Super Bowl. They were scoring points throughout the season. Everyone went into that Super Bowl expecting a shootout, and that's what we got. This isn't the same Kansas City that was scoring points and just rapid fire like they were. Even last year during the playoffs, the regular season, they weren't great, but they got hot. But this year, you're not seeing that. It was mainly their defense bailing them out and helping them throughout that winning streak. Earl Cole, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for the like. And thank you. Best of luck to your upcoming streams as well, Earl. Thanks for stopping by. And now, and we were saying that Kansas City, they won those games, but they were low-scoring games against teams like the Broncos, the Falcons, the Chargers without their starting quarterback, Justin Herbert, and the Raiders in ugly fashion, mainly off the backs of strong defensive play. Now, here comes the Buffalo Bills. They managed to score over 30 points, and that really laid the blueprint out on, hey, this is how you beat Kansas City. You score points. Plain and simple. So for the teams that are going to play against them come playoff time, and the teams that have them on the schedule for the Chargers in their rematch, which they should be having Justin Herbert start this time. For anyone that has to go against Kansas City in the playoffs potentially, could be maybe the Chargers, maybe the Bills again. Maybe this time they actually win. Who knows? Maybe their division. Maybe could be the Steelers, Ravens. The blueprint's simple. Score points against this team. I feel now that we've seen a team that can finally score points on this defense. We realize, okay, that's how you beat them. That's the best way to beat them. And if you can continue to score points, then you force Patrick Mahomes to play better. Because for Mahomes, he hasn't had to play great this season. He could just go out there, have a good enough game, maybe one TD a pick. But hey, as long as he wasn't, making too many mistakes, they could still find ways to win games. Interceptions didn't really matter that much. As long as they could find ways to win. But that's what they did. They found ways to win. They found ways to win. But now, if a team scores points on, maybe you put pressure on Mahomes to step up his game now and actually perform up to the standard we've seen him in past years. One of the reasons they're able to coast that winning streak is because Mahomes hasn't had the same pressure or hasn't needed to dominate as much, hasn't needed to put up as many touchdown passes and get the team to score as many points. And now, but hey, congratulations to the Buffalo Bills. They did what they needed to. They ended Kansas City's undefeated streak, and they cemented their case as top contenders. Long-term question is, can they get over the hump? But for now, Buffalo Bills, you have full bragging rights for this week. Congratulations. And now speaking of teams in the Kansas City Chiefs division, one of their division rivals, the Chargers, almost blew a big lead over the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday. Remember the first half, Chargers were going out there. They were lighting up the scoreboard. They were moving the ball downfield. Harbaugh was happy with the way Herbert was playing. Things were looking good. But then, second half, the Bengals got back into the game. Eventually, they tied the game up. But then a big J.K. Dobbins run ended up putting the Chargers up, giving them the game-winning touchdown for a 34-27 victory. But the second, it was a good first. Overall, it was a good offensive game. Throughout the game, there was at least teams scoring points and made it competitive. But at the same time, it felt like the two teams were trying to outdo themselves throughout the game. The Chargers in the second half almost outcharged themselves again. And the Bengals bungled again. This case, missing two field goals. That being a big deciding factor, because granted, even if those kicks were made by McPherson, it would have been a 1-point game, but it's like at the same time, the Bengals shot themselves in the foot with those missed field goals. They crawled all the way back in the game, only to be unable to close the deal. And the Chargers nearly blew a big lead, but they managed to get it together at the last minute. So in some ways, yeah, you could say the Bengals bungled and the Chargers almost outcharged themselves. But the Chargers get a win. The way I see it for now, say the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh's done an excellent job turning that team around into a good team. Do I think they're contenders yet? I don't think so yet. However, Harbaugh has managed to at least make this team a respectable team. And they're at least in content. So what I'm going to do, so good job there. But we're going to close this out, briefly talk about the Monday night game. Let's just talk about it real quickly. Houston Texans beat the Dallas Cowboys by a score of 34-10. On one hand, the Texans, they got the victory they need. They shake out the disappointing taste that loss to the Lions. Good for the Texans. But at the same time, though, it is against the Cowboys team that's struggling. But you know what? At the same time, for the Texans, you just take the win. You got to blow out win against a struggling team. Joe Mixon had himself a nice day. All the defense had to do was show up and stop the Cowboys from being able to exceed expectations on offense. And they did that. And that led to Mixon stealing the show. 20 carries, 109 yards, 2 receptions, 44 yards. Good enough for the Texans to win. Stay in the driver's seat in the AFC South, which, while it is one of the weaker divisions, it still is a good way. It's still good position to be in, even though it's a weaker division. Hey, you take the division lead any way you can get it, and that's what the Texans are doing. So like I said, for these guys that caught me earlier, I'm going to finish this off doing a contenders, pretenders little segment where I go through the different teams. But first, I'm going to take a quick break. Put some non-copyright music in the background as always. We go right back to close it out. Ladies and gentlemen, I am back after a quick break. Now we're going to close this bad boy out. We're going to do a segment, talk about contenders and pretenders. Simply put, I'm going to go through all the teams, give me my thoughts on whether they're a contender or pretender. Plain and simple, in one moment. All right, now, yep, I'm going to clear up my glasses a little bit. Now let's talk about it. I'm going to go through a list of, what I'm going to do for this contenders and pretenders is go through the list of teams. All the main teams that are in playoff contention or leading the division, and give you my thoughts on that. First, I'm going to pull up the division standings via post from the NFL's Instagram page. Then we're going to go through all the teams and we're going to go from there. Let's do it, folks. All right, let's do this. We're going to talk about, let's go. So we start the AFC. You got the Buffalo Bills. On paper, and yeah, we've been down this road before. They look like they're contenders. However, I've seen this team have strong starts, but Kansas City's always had their number in big games. Matter of fact, three of the last 4 times they've been eliminated from the playoffs, who got their number? The team they just beat in week 11 of the regular season. So I have to wonder with Buffalo, what will they do come playoff time? I mean, they are certainly look like they're contenders the way they're playing this year. Josh Allen's playing out of his mind. Maybe this is the year he steps up. I mean, I do think they are contenders. Though, I mean, this isn't about whether or not I think they'll actually get it done. But so far, the way they're looking this year, they are contenders. Barring obviously major injuries. Because, look, Buffalo doesn't have the greatest... Yeah, they don't have the greatest offense on paper, but they're finding ways to win games. Whether it be Miami, Kansas City, whether it be the Jets, whoever, they're winning games. And that's what counts the most. And for that, I got to give the Buffalo Bills credit as contenders. And even some of those wins they had against struggling teams, they blew them out. I mean, we saw throughout this. Let's go back early in the season. We saw they did manage, they beat the Seahawks 31-10. They destroyed the Titans, destroyed the Jaguars. You can say, okay, those are easy teams, but there's a difference between winning games that you should win as an easy fashion versus blowing those teams out. And Buffalo has blown out some teams that they were favored to beat, such as the Jacksonville Jaguars, and, say, the Tennessee Titans, even the Seattle Seahawks. So for that, I give them props as contenders. The Houston Texans, I got to consider them pretenders. Because C.J. Stroud, he's not horrible, but he's looking a little more human. He's not as flashy as he was his rookie year. And they have lost some games against usually most of their better competition they've lost. Their best win this season was against the Bills, I'll give them that. But outside of that, against tougher competition, Texans haven't struggled. Against the Lions, they let the Lions come back. I mean, they narrowly beat the Colts twice. They lost to the Jets on Halloween night. They lost to the Packers. And they barely beat the Jaguars and had to struggle against the Bears. I think Texans are pretenders. I don't see them as a Super Bowl contender at this point. They just if they do get the 4th seed, it would probably be against the Ravens or the Chargers, the way things are looking out. I don't know if they can win that. I think the Texans are a one-and-done team based off the fact they've lost against tougher competition, and even some games, like the game against the Jaguars, they struggled to win. I can't see them being contenders at this point. The Steelers, even though the Steelers have a good team this year, Russell Wilson is looking like a better quarterback than we're used to seeing, than we saw the past couple of years. He's not necessarily back in Seattle form, but he's solid. I just don't see this team as a Super Bowl contender. I still think they're pretenders, even at 8-2. Yeah, I just because Pittsburgh, I mean, yeah, they often win games in close fashion. They don't really have, they're not able to really score a lot of points. They score enough points to win games, but if come playoff time, let's say they get the number 2 seed, maybe they get an easy first round game against maybe the Broncos or maybe the Colts or Dolphins miraculously work their way into the 7th seed. Let's say that happens. Maybe the Steelers get an easier win there as the 2 seed, but then you got to go from there. Maybe the second round you got to go, or maybe they get the 3 seed. Say either way, you get maybe you win as the 3 seed or the 2 seed, but then the second round you probably got to go against Buffalo or Kansas City. I don't think it's going to pan out well for Pittsburgh. I see them as pretenders at this point. Ravens, so far, I don't see the contender team from them. Pretty obvious. Because even though they've won 7 games, they've looked good at times. They've also struggled in some games to close out. Most notably against Kansas City and Pittsburgh, 2 of the toughest games on their schedule. So I'm not sold on them as contenders. Kansas City Chiefs, you gotta consider them contenders no matter what. Even though they have been winning ugly this year, there's always the possibility they could go rogue come Super playoff time and make another run to the Super Bowl. Look around like Chargers. This year they're pretenders. I do think maybe a year or two Harbaugh's got them positioned to contend, but not this season. Not yet. And now switching gears to the NFC. Eagles. I think the Eagles are contenders. As long as they don't collapse like they did last year, they have the potential. I mean, I don't know if they'll get past the Detroit Lions, honestly, but they're one of the top teams in the NFC. They're at least contenders on that alone. They could at least make a deep run, maybe go up against the Lions in the NFC Championship game the way things are looking right now. I see them as contenders. And then you got the Commanders, 7-4. I don't think they're contenders yet. They could be down the line, but they still got to learn to win some of those close games against teams like the Ravens, Steelers, and Eagles more. I still got them pretenders at the moment. Then you get the Falcons, pretenders. We don't need to elaborate on it. They're 6-5 by default because they're in a struggling division. Falcons haven't blown me away as contenders, so we're not going to go on to that. So now, NFC West. Cardinals, I think, were the team that wins that division, but I don't see them as contenders at all, obviously. I mean, they could win out the division. Maybe Kyler Murray could be a dark horse candidate for MVP, which we discussed on the Sunday morning show. But I don't see them as contenders. They're pretenders. And then you got the NFC North. Packers, like I said, pretenders. I'm not impressed with the way they've won some games. Even the Vikings, against teams like the Titans and Jaguars, they've kind of won ugly. I don't see them being able to keep up come playoff time, especially with Sam Darnold. Even though he's having himself a solid season, I just don't feel like he's going to be able to help them when the pressure's on come playoff time. I'll go with the Vikings as pretenders. And then the Lions, they're contenders. They're the favorites in the NFC, and they're currently the odds-on favorite to make the Super Bowl. Let's just leave it at that. Detroit Lions are blowing out teams. They're winning games easy fashion. They decimated the Jacksonville Jaguars 52-9. Yes, it was an easy game, but there's a difference between winning a game that's easy on the schedule and decimating the team on the schedule that's considered an easy game. The Lions decimated. Folks, decimated the Jaguars. 4 touchdowns. Goff, Montgomery had decent yardage. Lions, I mean, they're one of the top rushing teams, averaging 152 yards per game, 25 sacks. This team is on a roll, clearly contenders to make it to their first Super Bowl in franchise history. And I could talk about some of the other teams, but I think we know the rest of the teams in the NFC West are all middle of the pack. Niners are on a big Super Bowl hangover. The Super Bowl losers curse is catching up to them this year. We pretty much said everything could say about Week 11. There is one more thing I want to briefly talk about, though. Daniel Jones is going to be benched for the rest of the season for the New York Giants, barring injuries. We said it before, let's say it again. They made a huge mistake giving Daniel Jones that contract. But for as an Eagles fan, hallelujah, it was the best thing our division rival could do. And you let Saquon walk and you gave him to my team. So, Giants, this confirms that Daniel Jones contract was the biggest mistake you made. And as a fan of a division rival, I take great joy in knowing that. Well, I knew it at the time, whether that be us Eagles fans, hell, Cowboys fans, Commanders fans, we'll stay united on this one. Hell, Packers, Seahawks, we all knew it was a mistake. I'm sure even a lot of Giants fans knew it was a mistake at the time. Even one of my bosses at my job, who's a Giants fan, even at the time said he would have preferred they pay Saquon over Daniel Jones. So there were even Giants fans that knew that was a bad idea. So, yep, this is what happens when management incompetence reigns supreme year after year after year. Now you see it coming back to bite the Giants. I mean, sure, they had that one fluke season. They made the playoffs 2022, but they come crashing down back to reality. And is they're a poorly run team, and poorly run teams make bad decisions that keep them at the bottom of the league. I'll leave it at that. Everyone that tuned in, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. Whether you caught it for a little bit, whether you caught it live or on the replay, I hope you enjoyed this. This one will be uploaded to Spotify. I'll share the link when it's available, both on YouTube and my Twitter. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, I'll put the link to it in the chat, and I'll even put the link to it in the comments for everyone catching it on the replay. So to everyone tuned in, thanks for tuning in. I hope you had a great night. Hope you're having a great night or day, depending on when you're catching it. It's your boy Nicky Stees signing off. Thanks for stopping by and supporting the channel as always. Until next time, peace.